The Shadow Spectrum, Episode 7, The Strings We Don't See. Welcome back to the Shadow Spectrum. If you've journeyed with me so far, you've likely begun to see that the shadow isn't a villain, it's a language. Every defense, every impulse, every performance we've explored has been a dialect of survival, a way the nervous system speaks when it cannot rest. In our last episode, Fragile Thrones, Validation, Visibility and Theatricality, we stood beneath the bright lights of performance and applause. We traced how visibility became value, how safety merged with spectacle, and how many of us learned to speak in dialects of drama and display. The mirror was interpersonal. We sought reflection in the eyes of others, applause as affirmation, and presence through performance. Today, the mirror widens. We turn from the personal stage to the systemic theatre, from the individual's performance to the institutions that reward it. Because if our last exploration asked, "Who am I when no one's watching?" this one asks, why does the world cheer louder for the shadow than for sincerity? This is the Puppet Strings, a descent into the architecture of influence, where systems reward manipulation, charm, and control more than honesty, empathy, or humility. We'll examine why certain traits, those we diagnose in individuals, are celebrated in leaders, CEOs, and influencers, why we call it Machiavellianism in politics, strategy in business, charisma in entertainment, and why empathy so often feels like a liability in a world wired for self-interest. It's a disquieting realization. We are taught to distrust manipulation, yet live within structures that depend on it. This episode invites you to see beyond morality into mechanics, to trace how systems themselves shape shadows, because what we reward, we replicate. And what we replicate becomes culture. From individuals to institutions, the shadow is not confined to the psyche, it is structural. What begins as a survival reflex in the child, control, charm, and compliance, evolves into the operating principles of the adult world. We reward the strategic, the fearless, the image-savvy. And so psychological defenses become organizational virtues. Consider, in corporate culture, we praise decisiveness, even when it dismisses empathy. In politics, we call deceit strategy and coercion strength. On social media, we mistake attention for influence, image for integrity. Each environment is a reward loop. Those who speak the language of dominance, certainty, control, and persuasion rise fastest. Those fluent in nuance, compassion, or hesitation, the languages of regulation, are often overlooked. And so our social hierarchies invert the nervous system's wisdom. They elevate fight and freeze, suppress rest and repair. In NSL terms, this is a culture speaking in sympathetic syntax, clipped cadence, hard consonants, sharp certainty, unable to breathe into ambiguity. When tone itself becomes a tool of power, language ceases to connect, it commands. Systems that teach the shadow. Let's trace the three great theatres of manipulation. 1. Corporate psychopathy, where performance metrics outweigh morality and profit sanctifies predation. 2. Political Machiavellianism, where expedience replaces ethics, and power is its own justification. 3. Social narcissism, where self becomes brand, and attention is the new currency of existence. Each arena operates under a similar axiom. Ends justify means. In these environments, empathy slows progress, doubt undermines authority, and authenticity risks alienation. What emerges is a collective nervous system conditioned to prize control over connection, charm over truth, perception over presence. Through the mirror linguistic hypothesis, we can decode how language reflects these values. In each context, speech patterns reveal state, the CEO's decisive brevity, clipped syntax signaling dominance, the politician's strategic ambiguity, plausible deniability dressed as diplomacy, the influencer's performative authenticity, vulnerability staged for validation. Each dialect masks the same intention. Control the narrative, shape the mirror, secure survival through visibility or authority. This isn't a condemnation, it's recognition. These traits thrive because the systems around them reward dysregulation. In unstable markets, volatile leaders appear strong. In chaotic feeds, dramatic voices rise. In moral grey zones, certainty feels safe. But as we'll see, this is a misread of strength, a cultural fight response mistaken for leadership. Evolutionary roots. Why do such traits persist? Because manipulation at its core is an adaptive strategy. In evolutionary terms, hierarchy ensured survival. Those able to influence access to resource, manipulator frames harm as necessity, cruelty as courage. Game theory explains the calculus. Voters reward apparent strength over moral subtlety. A leader who hesitates looks weak, one who dominates feels safe. Thus, shadow syntax, brevity, finality, and certainty become a political asset. Case study. A populist leader simplifies complexity into slogans. Nuance vanishes. Outrage spikes. A crowd craving coherence confuses clarity with truth. Algorithmic amplification rewards extremity. Moderation disappears from feeds and forums alike. In such ecosystems, Machiavellianism is not deviance, it's design. Social narcissism, the image economy. If corporate systems monetize output and political systems monetize allegiance, social systems monetize attention. In the image economy, the self becomes product, identity, performance. Platforms reward visibility over veracity. The influencer archetype embodies performative vulnerability, curated imperfection as a commodity. The algorithm favors novelty, controversy, and confession. In this theatre, sincerity without spectacle is inaudible. Social narcissism isn't vanity, it's adaptive exhibitionism. In oversaturated markets, exaggeration equals existence. The nervous system, conditioned by intermittent validation, likes, shares, follows, learns to chase applause as a safety signal. NSL observes rising prosodic inflation, exaggerated pitch, and emotive cadence designed to captivate. MLH reads caption syntax, self-referential, declarative, absolute. I feel morphs into I am. Each post, each story, a micro-performance. Drama earns attention. Attention earns survival. What began as an expression becomes an audition. Game theory and control theory, the mathematics of manipulation. Beneath these theatres runs code. Game theory models choice in competitive contexts. Control theory maps feedback loops. Together, they reveal why shadows thrive. In zero-sum games, cooperation is fragile. Trust is a risk, defection an advantage. Players optimize outcomes, not ethics. Systems built on these assumptions reward self-maximizing behavior, the essence of shadow strategy. Control theory adds structure. Loops stabilize around predictable input-output patterns. If manipulation yields a reward, the system reinforces it. Over time, deception becomes equilibrium. Thus, cultural conditioning emerges. Control equals safety. Dominance equals success. MLH notes linguistic reinforcement. Phrases like take control, command respect, win big embed aggression in aspiration. In such architectures, the nervous system habituates to chronic vigilance. Power feels scarce, competition constant, regulation becomes rebellion. SL view, the tone of dominance. Across all systems, dominance shares a sonic fingerprint, clipped cadence, rapid delivery signaling control. Certainty syntax, declaratives over interrogatives. Status prosody, downward inflection, conveying authority. Contrast with regulated tone, rhythmic pacing, melodic variation, and invitational phrasing command compliance. The other cultivates connection. When dominance becomes a dialect, empathy erodes, conversations become contests, dialogue, duel. The remedy is not mutiny, but mirror work, hearing how we've internalized the master's voice. In families, classrooms, workplaces, and feeds, we echo the syntax of supremacy. To dismantle systemic shadow, we must first rewild our words, return language to its relational roots. As we close this part, consider, where have you mistaken control for competence? Where has charisma seduced you into silence? Which systems around you reward manipulation as mastery? Awareness is emancipation. To see the strings is to remember your hands. The puppeteer stage, power, perception, and the script of control. The stage of power is rarely lit by cruelty. More often, it glows with the soft light of mentorship, recognition, and opportunity, the appearance of care-concealing choreography. The puppeteer is not a villain. They are a strategist of perception, fluent in the art of guiding others toward compliance through the careful orchestration of language, tone, and timing. In the modern world, this archetype is not only rewarded, it is revered. In corporate offices, political halls, and algorithmic platforms, influence without resistance is considered a form of genius. Leadership has become synonymous with the ability to shape perception, not nurture truth. When we study the puppeteer, we're not studying evil, we're studying the efficiency of control. It is the subtle art of making people feel safe while scripting their behavior, of turning autonomy into allegiance through language that sounds empowering but acts enclosing. In institutional systems, where metrics outrank meaning, control rarely announces itself. It emerges as mentorship, guidance, and support. We believe in you becomes a leash disguised as an affirmation. We're all in this together becomes a boundary dissolved into collective obligation. To be guided by a puppeteer is to feel trusted, even chosen, while slowly internalizing the limits of one's own voice. Over time, autonomy contracts while gratitude expands. The nervous system begins to mistake pressure for purpose, praise for permission. This archetype thrives where ambiguity is rewarded, where politeness masks pressure, and obedience is rebranded as loyalty. In such environments, praise becomes the currency of control. The psychology of the puppeteer. At its core, the puppeteer seeks certainty, not from fear, but from survival conditioning. They have learned, often early in life, that stability depends on foresight. In environments where unpredictability once equaled danger, control became compassion, a way to keep everyone calm, contained, and aligned. But as this instinct matures in professional life, it evolves into a skill, perception management. The puppeteer doesn't dominate, they guide. They don't coerce, they frame. The ability to read emotional currents becomes the foundation for power, and the boundary between genuine attunement and strategic calibration blurs. In NSL, nervous system language terms, their physiology reflects constant anticipation. The breath is shallow but steady, the voice modulated, pauses are intentional. The tone soothes even as it steers. To listen to such a person is to feel simultaneously reassured and restrained. Through the mirror linguistic hypothesis (MLH), their syntax reveals hierarchy. Declaratives dominate over interrogatives. Statements replace curiosity. Obviously, clearly, and we need are markers of control, verbal cues that position the speaker as both authority and ally. Each phrase is a string pulled. This behavior is not necessarily malicious, it is adaptive. When systems prize composure, efficiency, and performance, those fluent in perception ascend. Institutions become mirrors reflecting this pattern to themselves, rewarding certainty and punishing vulnerability. The puppeteer thus emerges as a systemic necessity, a stabilizer in structures that equate transparency with weakness. Case study. The corporate puppeteer. Consider a familiar story, not of overt coercion, but of gradual containment. An individual enters an organization with a clear intent, to contribute meaningfully and develop mastery. The system receives this ambition warmly. Praise flows easily, dedication is recognized, potential affirmed, extra effort rewarded. In the language of the puppeteer, affirmation is the first act of enrollment. We believe in your future sounds like empowerment, but it also establishes ownership. Gratitude becomes tethered to guidance. Initiative is interpreted as loyalty. Over time, the role expands. New responsibilities emerge without formal recognition, a silent equation between effort and esteem. The system speaks in compliments, not contracts. Every added task feels like proof of trust. Yet beneath this apparent growth, autonomy contracts. The individual's voice begins to adapt to institutional tone, cautious, measured, and deferential. The nervous system, flooded by pride and pressure, suppresses signals of fatigue. In such contexts, the puppeteer may not be a single person, but a systemic persona, a cultural language spoken by the organization itself. Support is conditional, encouragement instrumental. The higher one climbs, the more invisible the strings become. Personal reflection. Losing my voice in the machinery. When I began my second role as an engineer, I was genuinely excited. It felt like a space where I could grow, a bridge between what I knew and what I wanted to master. I made it clear early on that my goal was professional development, and for a while the signs were promising. My work was praised. I was offered opportunities beyond my contract, and I took them willingly. I worked long hours, stayed available, and became known for reliability. As recognition grew, so did the expectations. Each compliment carried a hidden equation. You're capable, therefore you can carry more. When I began negotiating a master's in systems engineering at Cranfield, a university perfectly aligned with the field I worked in, the conversation was encouraging. I had already completed several advanced courses, including IBM requirements and deep systems modules, to demonstrate my commitment. But as time passed, the tone shifted. My workload expanded rapidly, support did not. Life outside of work began to demand more from me too. I found myself stretched thin between the company's ambitions and my own humanity. I tried to raise it gently to voice the imbalance, but somewhere along the way, my words became careful. My tone softened. I hesitated before asking for clarity, mindful not to appear ungrateful. The more I adapted my communication to the corporate script, the less I recognized my own. Eventually, the pressure converged. I needed time away to recalibrate. When I returned, the sponsorship was no longer on the table. The language used was polite, regretful. We've reconsidered. It may not be ideal right now. The warmth remained, but the certainty was gone. Rationally, I understood their logic. Timing, workload, priorities, all legitimate considerations. Yet beneath that rationality lay something more human, disappointment. I had worked hard, delivered results, and embodied the company's values. I had done what was asked, more even, and still, when support was most needed, it withdrew. In hindsight, I can see how the script unfolded. The promises had been aspirational, not contractual. The praise had been provisional. I was not being developed, I was being deployed. My gratitude had been the guarantee of my silence. From an NSL perspective, I can trace how this manifested somatically. The steady breath of enthusiasm gave way to the constricted breath of caution. My vocal tone, once curious and confident, became measured and muted. The rhythm of my speech began to mirror the organization's expectations, clipped, cautious, compliant. From a mirror linguistic lens, I see how the language that once motivated me, "We believe in your growth, we're investing in your future," subtly mirrors hierarchy. Each phrase positions support as something granted, not collaborated. When those phrases evaporated, the emotional scaffolding collapsed with them. The experience taught me something essential. Systems often promise growth to sustain performance, not autonomy. Praise can function as policy. And when language begins to feel warm but weightless, the body will often register the truth first. In the breath, the throat, the silence that precedes self-censorship. That was when I began to see the machinery for what it was, not a singular betrayal, but a script. One written in the grammar of performance and the syntax of subtle control. When personal difficulties arise, those human variables unaccounted for in corporate calculus, the facade begins to strain. Focus waivers, requests for support feel risky. Each word now weighs against an unspoken ledger, gratitude owed, patience rationed. Silence grows where uncertainty should be voiced. The puppeteer archetype thrives here, not in cruelty, but in calibrated distance. Offers of empathy carry subtext. Take your time, but don't take too long. Eventually, the promise shifts. We've reconsidered our sponsorship. The tone is soft, regretful, cloaked in inevitability. The grammar has changed from inclusion to exclusion. We no longer implies partnership, but policy. This is linguistic withdrawal, a reversal delivered in the cadence of care. The message is not shouted, it is performed. In MLH analysis, such phrasing reveals hierarchy, agency removed through passive construction. It's not ideal, and subjectless decisions. We've decided. The NSL counterpart manifests in softened tone, slow delivery, pauses signaling empathy, a sonic cushion for disappointment. Yet the nervous system hears the truth beneath words. The boundary has shifted, and belonging now depends on silence. The aftermath is often internalized as failure. The employee rationalizes loss through self-blame. I should have done more. They were right to reconsider. This is the genius of the puppeteer system. Power maintained through gratitude, control sustained through introspection, reflection prompt. When did your diligence become your leash? Mini practice. Rewrite the withdrawn offer in NSL. Replace ambiguity with autonomy. Your growth matters beyond this role. How can we align support with your vision? Scripts of control, linguistic choreography. The lexicon of control rarely sounds coercive. It thrives on optimism, unity, and shared identity. Phrases like, we're all in this together, promise inclusion while diffusing accountability. Let's be realistic reframes ambition as immaturity. We'll revisit that later, suspends hope in bureaucratic limbo. Each phrase is a behavioral contract sealed by politeness. In MLH, they function as compliance codes, polite imperatives disguised as collaboration. In NSL, they register as mild constriction, half breaths, fixed smiles, and shoulders lifted. The body complies even before the mind does. In game theoretic terms, this is deferred dominance, control maintained by preserving optionality. When outcomes remain open, subordinates remain invested. Hope becomes the leash. Practice. Identify one phrase you've mistaken for care. Translate it into clarity. Will support your development becomes, we've allocated time and funding for your training this quarter. Emotional leverage and strategic attunement. Not all empathy is equal. True empathy aims to understand. Strategic empathy aims to steer. The puppeteer listens deeply, but directionally, collecting emotional data to guide outcomes. Through a polyvagal lens, even simulated co-regulation can calm a body into compliance. Warm tone, eye contact, and measured cadence. These cues trigger safety responses, even if sincerity is absent. The body relaxes, mistaking strategy for support. Relief without repair breeds dependency. Strategic empathy pacifies dissent. The listener leaves soothed but unchanged. Gratitude replaces discernment. Practice. Recall a time comfort quieted your concern. Journal what your body knew before gratitude intervened. Perception management. Optics as outcome. In modern systems, perception is performance. Visibility equates to virtue. The puppeteer curates appearance, not to deceive, but to survive in structures where image determines influence. Meetings prioritize narrative alignment over innovation. Open-door policies become symbols of accessibility while decisions are made elsewhere. Public praise conceals private neglect. Mirror linguistically, these environments rely on performative inclusivity. Everyone's voice matters is voiced in closing cadence, signaling completion, not invitation. The NSL supports this, bright tone, quick transitions, upbeat pace. It sounds inclusive, but the body of the listener feels closure, not opening. Thus institutions become theatres of affirmation, applause without accountability. Unhooking the strings, reclaiming autonomy awareness begins in the body. Notice when your breath shortens, shoulders lift, or voice flattens. These are somatic signatures of subtle subordination. In NSL, autonomy sounds like steadiness, a slower tempo, a fuller exhale, phrasing anchored in ownership. Replace obligation with agency. I should becomes I choose. Draft a consent script for future interactions. Before I agree, I'd like to clarify expectations and mutual benefit. Each time you practice linguistic consent, you weaken the system's hold. Mirror talk practice. Voice one deferred desire aloud without apology or modulation. Hear the difference between compliance and clarity. Reflection prompt. What would clear power sound like in your mouth? Systems reward the shadows they rely upon. When outcomes eclipse ethics, manipulation masquerades as mastery. Yet awareness dissolves illusion. The puppeteer's strings lose tension the moment they are seen. To integrate this awareness is to reclaim authorship, to move from orchestration to improvisation, from scripting to sincerity. Power grounded in presence doesn't demand performance. It invites participation. Reflection. Where can you speak without seeking permission? Next, we'll meet the trickster's mirror, where charm replaces control, and confusion becomes a tool of survival. Between strings and smoke. Before we step into the next theatre, take a breath. Notice the sound of it, the exhale that loosens the throat, the pause that invites the body back to itself. We've just left a stage lit by strategy, a world where praise concealed pressure and tone masked terms. The puppeteer spoke in certainties, framing care as containment. Their strength lay in orchestration, in knowing exactly which string to pull and when silence could serve as command. But not every form of influence thrives on clarity. Some survive through ambiguity, the trickster's domain. Where the puppeteer tightens structure, the trickster dissolves it. Their mastery is not precision, but possibility. They disarm with wit, distract with humour, and destabilize with paradox. You never quite know where you stand, and that's the point. Confusion is cover, play is persuasion. If the puppeteer's gift is to make you believe you chose their direction, the trickster's genius is subtler, to make you laugh as you hand them the map. This next act is lighter in tone, but no less calculated. The trickster doesn't lead through fear, they lead through fascination. Their tools are charm, spontaneity, and narrative improvisation. A mirror made of smoke, reflecting fragments rather than forms. Before entering, ask, how do I respond to charm? Do I lean closer, or do I guard my ground? The trickster's mirror, charm, chaos, and cultural collusion charm is the softest mask control that can be worn. It arrives not as authority, but as affection, a warm gaze, a quick wit, a playful phrase that turns tension into laughter. Yet beneath the sparkle of spontaneity lies a deeper structure, manipulation by diffusion. Where the puppeteer used choreography to guide behavior, the trickster uses chaos to disarm discernment. The trickster archetype is ancient, the shapeshifter, the jester, the comic who exposes truth by bending it. In mythology, figures like Hermes, Loki, and Coyote operated between worlds, bending order through mischief. In modern life, this archetype re-emerges in charismatic leaders, viral influencers, and even in ourselves, whenever humour hides honesty or we use irony as armour. Unlike the puppeteer, who builds hierarchy through precision, the trickster flattens it through relatability. They play the everyman, using warmth to bypass skepticism. Their language dances, a rhythm of charm and contradiction. I'm just being honest, they'll say, moments after exaggerating the truth. They speak in ellipses, not periods. Their syntax mirrors improvisation, pauses for effect, metaphors in motion. From a mirror linguistic view, the trickster's language reflects flux. Hedged statements, playful qualifiers, stories nested in stories. Their sentences mimic smoke, expanding, swirling, evading capture. From an NSL perspective, their nervous system reads as fluid. They modulate rapidly, from enthusiasm to empathy, from mockery to mirth. Their voice dances across registers, keeping listeners entranced. Physiologically, this variability triggers intrigue. The body leans forward, seeking rhythm in unpredictability. But charm, when untethered from integrity, becomes a tool of diversion. The trickster can shift moral ground mid-conversation, recasting contradictions as cleverness. It's just a joke becomes a shield. Your overthinking it becomes a smokescreen. What begins as play can harden into avoidance, truth blurred into entertainment. Culturally, we reward this fluency. The charismatic disruptor, the ironic commentator, the comedian who says what we're all thinking, they hold our attention because they embody contradiction. They tell forbidden truths cloaked in humour. In a landscape fatigued by moral rigidity, ambiguity feels like freedom. Yet, over time, this celebration of cleverness can erode trust. When sincerity becomes passé, performance becomes the only currency. The trickster archetype thus thrives in cultures that conflate authenticity with relatability. We forgive inconsistency if it's charming. We reward misdirection if it's witty. Influence shifts from argument to effect. The anatomy of charm is often mistaken for warmth. But warmth builds safety, charm builds intrigue. One anchors, the other invites pursuit. Charm creates a low-level sympathetic activation, curiosity fused with caution. You feel seen but also scanned. The trickster's attention feels generous, but it's transactional, calibrated to sustain connection through amusement. In NSL terms, charm manifests through vocal modulation, soft laughter, strategic pauses, and subtle mimicry. These cues trigger oxytocin and parasympathetic ease, disarming critical thought. The listener's body interprets variability as vitality. This person is alive, engaged, safe. But that same variability can obscure intention. The mirror linguistic structure of charm is circular, questions that redirect, compliments that conceal, stories that blur fact and feeling. You know how it is becomes both empathy and evasion. The trickster avoids being pinned down. Ambiguity is their native grammar. Cultural collusion. Why do societies reward the trickster? Because chaos entertains and distraction sells. In media, politics, and marketing, ambiguity sustains attention longer than clarity. Outrage cycles faster than reason. We scroll not for truth, but for novelty, and the trickster delivers both. In leadership, this archetype manifests as the charismatic disruptor, one who reframes unpredictability as innovation. They speak in sound bites, metaphors, and micro-stories, linguistic glitter that disguises gaps in substance. Where breaking all the rules becomes a brand. In relationships, the trickster can appear as the magnetic avoidant, emotionally expressive yet elusive, using humor to deflect depth. "I'm just joking" becomes shorthand for "I won't be held accountable." The NSL tells the deeper truth. Rapid tempo, high variability, sudden laughter masking tension, signs of a system-fluent innovation. The MLH confirms it, shifting pronouns, looping logic, clever reframes that leave listeners entertained but uncertain. Culturally, we collude with tricksters because they mirror our contradictions, craving both safety and stimulation, certainty and surprise. They embody what we repress, the impulse to break rules, to bend truth, to charm our way through consequence. In admiring them, we excuse our own evasions. The shadow of play is sacred, a state where creativity dissolves rigidity. Yet when play is weaponized, it becomes theatre. The trickster's shadow emerges when wit replaces honesty, and humor becomes camouflage. When challenged, the trickster often retreats behind irony. Accountability becomes absurdity. "You're taking me too seriously." This rhetorical sidestep repositions sincerity as naivete. The listener, seeking truth, is recast as humorless. In mirror linguistic decoding, irony reframes criticism as misunderstanding. Words lose fixed meaning, tone governs interpretation. The trickster's grammar is slippery, verbs softened, nouns swapped for metaphors. What can't be pinned down can't be challenged. Yet beneath the surface, this performance often hides fragility. Many tricksters were once punished for seriousness. They learned that levity earns belonging. The laugh became a shield, cleverness a currency. Their charm is survival with regulation. Recognizing the trickster in ourselves, most of us adopt the trickster mask when truth feels dangerous. We joke about pain to test if it's safe to reveal. We redirect with charm to avoid confrontation. We intellectualize emotion into irony. These micro-maneuvers keep relationships light and intimacy shallow. Self-observation begins with tone. Ask, when I joke, what truth am I softening? When I charm, what discomfort am I avoiding? In NSL, honesty feels grounded, slower breath, even cadence, warmth without haste. In MLH, sincerity favors clarity, direct pronouns, simple syntax, fewer qualifiers. The shift from performance to presence is subtle but physiological. The body relaxes when words align with truth. Practice. Share a truth without cushioning it in humor. Notice your body's response, tension, release, or both. The trickster in the age of irony. We live in an era saturated with spectacle. Online, irony has replaced intimacy. Virality depends on contradiction. The most shared messages are those that entertain ambiguity. Influencers pivot between sincerity and satire. Leaders meme their own policies. System defaults to dominance. Scanning for leverage, not connection. In their worldview, hierarchy is natural, competition sacred, and compassion conditional. Where the puppeteer manipulates perception and the trickster manipulates ambiguity, the predator manipulates the environment. They curate ecosystems that reward aggression, performance metrics that prize speed over sustainability, and recruitment that favors confidence over competence. They rise fastest in systems built on scarcity, where resources, recognition, and belonging are limited. This archetype's mythology is woven into cultural narratives of success. Only the strong survive. Winners never quit. Nice guys finish last. These aphorisms sanctify self-interest, reframing ruthlessness as realism. Yet they rest on a Darwinian distortion, evolution as endless combat, not complex cooperation. Modern evolutionary biology highlights symbiosis as a survival strategy, but culture lags behind, mistaking domination for destiny. In politics, the predator archetype thrives under crisis. Fear rallies followers. Decisive tone mimics certainty. The electorate, dysregulated by threat, seeks a strong posture over nuanced policy. In corporate settings, these leaders ascend through bold claims and minimal doubt. Mirror neurons reward confidence more than caution. The system selects for dominance tone, not dialectical skill. In mirror linguistic decoding, predator speech reveals truncated syntax, short declaratives, definitive verbs, and scarcity metaphors. Win, beat, take. Pronouns shift toward self, my team, our edge, reflecting territorial framing. In NSL, their voice anchors in the chest, low and resonant, signaling stability through power. Pauses are rare, rhythm relentless. Beneath the armor lies fragility, intolerance for uncertainty, empathy processed as inefficiency. Vulnerability threatens hierarchy, reflection slows momentum. Thus the predator surrounds themselves with mirrors that flatter yes men, loyalists, or silent subordinates. Their greatest illusion is meritocracy, believing that position proves virtue. The myth of meritocracy, cruelty as competence meritocracy, promises fairness, success by skill, and reward by effort. Yet in practice, it often sanctifies privilege and justifies exclusion. When filtered through predator logic, meritocracy mutates into moral alibi. If I've succeeded, I must deserve it. If you've failed, you must not. Fear sustains this illusion. Workers driven by scarcity compete rather than collaborate. Students fearing failure self-censor curiosity. The system appears efficient precisely because dissent dissolves under duress. Consider the corporate slogan, What gets measured gets managed. Behind its rational veneer lies reductionism. Only quantifiable traits count. Empathy, reflection, and moral courage vanish from metrics. In such climates, cruelty masquerades as clarity. A leader who cuts staff is decisive. One who questions the directive is emotional. The MLH exposes this semantic inversion. Words like tough, resilient, and high-performing often mask exploitative expectations. Praise becomes pathology when it rewards suppression. You're a rock sounds noble until you realize rocks don't feel. Educational and corporate ladders reinforce this myth through ritualized stress, exams, deadlines, quarterly targets, and baptisms of burnout. Survivors internalize superiority, endurance mistaken for excellence. Those who falter are labeled unfit, ignoring context or inequity. Culturally, the media glorifies the predator as visionary, the uncompromising genius, the ruthless reformer. Narratives celebrate sacrifice, rarely scrutinizing what or who is sacrificed. The nervous system of society adapts, empathy dulls or sharpens. Breaking the spell requires remapping value. True merit integrates mastery with morality, competence coupled with conscience. An SL plus MLHD code, the tone and syntax of dominance NSL, nervous system language. Dominance tones feature compressed breath, downward inflection, controlled tempo. Speech is deliberate but forceful, signaling finality. Listeners' vagal tone drops. Heart rate accelerates, micro-expressions tighten. In meetings, such voices silence dissent before logic engages. Contrast with authentic authority, grounded breath, even cadence, invitational phrasing. Authority rooted in self-regulation, not intimidation, evokes co-regulation in others. The body reads safety, not subjugation. MLH, mirror linguistic hypothesis. Dominant syntax favors imperatives, do this, absolutes, always, never, and self-referential framing. Metaphors invoke battle, sport, conquest. Politeness markers vanish under urgency. This grammar reflects an inner script. Control equals clarity. Authentic authority, by contrast, employs collaborative pronouns. We, together, conditional modals could, might. And process language lets explore. Its semantics mirror mutuality. Learning to discern tone and syntax reclaims agency. The body, once conditioned to freeze under command, can reorient toward voices that invite rather than impose. From fear to principle, fear has shaped most definitions of strength. We admire endurance over empathy, conquest over compassion. But nervous systems built on vigilance cannot sustain vision. True strength is regulatory, the capacity to act without collapse, to hold power without harm. Reflection prompt. How has fear informed your idea of success? Which traits do you associate with strength, and which of those were survival strategies mistaken for virtues? Notice physical responses. Does assertive feel like tightening? Does firm constrict your chest? The body reveals where definitions imprison. Practice. Identify one power phrase you use or hear often. No excuses. Push through. Failure isn't an option. Rewrite it into a principled phrase that honors both agency and humanity. Examples. No excuses rewritten could be, let's understand the barriers. Push through, manage, and pause, then proceed with clarity. Failure isn't an option, rewritten as learning is built on iteration. Speak each aloud. Feel the difference. One contracts, one expands. Regulation is resonance. Reclaiming language is reclaiming leadership. When words align with nervous system truth, authority becomes stewardship, not subjugation. Integration. Conscious power and the ethics of awareness. Influence without awareness is extraction. Power without ethics is entropy. Conscious power is presence in motion. From strings to source, the theatre of manipulation is seductive. Its lighting is flattering, its applause immediate. But every puppeteer eventually feels the tension of their own strings. The body knows the strain of control, the shallow breath, the jaw set tight to hold authority in place. When awareness dawns, those threads glimmer not as instruments of mastery, but as chords of fatigue. Conscious power begins where orchestration ends. It is the slow exhale after years of vigilance, the steadying of rhythm once borrowed by the system. Here power is not performance but pulse. The source lies not in domination or dependence, but in regulation, the nervous system's capacity to stay steady while engaging complexity. Every system is, at heart, a nervous system. Corporations, governments, and families, each is animated by collective states of threat or trust. When we unlearn coercion within, institutions can uncoil without. Reform begins somatically. A single regulated leader can downshift an entire culture. Pause. Feel your breath arrive and leave. Notice how tempo carries tone. The body that once braced to command can now breathe to connect. Presence, not pressure, is the first language of authority reclaimed. Systems mirror selves. Our external architectures echo internal states. The hierarchies we inherit often reproduce the stratifications of our own psyche. Intellect supervising emotion, impulse suppressed by protocol. When individuals operate from chronic fight-flight, organizations mirror urgency, tight deadlines, perpetual crisis, and heroics masquerading as productivity. Freeze manifests as bureaucracy, fawn as overservicing clients, fight as competitive silos. Mirror linguistic decode. We need this yesterday. Tension built through adrenaline from the project manager. Let's not make waves leads to dorsal. The archetypal evolution of power. Every shadow contains a seed of service. Puppeteer evolves to conductor from manipulating outcomes to orchestrating harmony. The conductor cues without coercing, hearing the intelligence in every section. The trickster evolves to storyteller, from chaos crafting to truth teasing through humor and paradox. Wit becomes revelation, not distraction. Predator evolves to steward, from consuming to conserving. Strength expressed as guardianship, courage measured by restraint. Integration is not erasure, but graduation. Each archetype keeps its gift, strategy, creativity, fearlessness, but weds it to conscience. Reflection prompt. Under threat, which role do I assume? Do I tighten strings, crack jokes, or bare teeth? Which evolved form waits behind that reflex? Servant leadership and transparent intention. Power purified becomes service. Servant leadership, echoed from Lao Tzu to modern theorists, inverts hierarchy. The leader's authority derives from enlarging others' autonomy. Transparent intention is its nervous system signal, the felt sense that no hidden agenda hums beneath words. Ambiguity breeds vigilance, clarity breeds calm, linguistic markers of transparency. Here's what I know, here's what I don't. This decision serves X value. If that shifts, we revisit. Your dissent is data, not disloyalty. Case illustration. A CEO facing layoffs convenes open forums, shares financials, invites co-designed solutions. Anxiety spikes, then steadies. Honesty metabolizes fear faster than spin. Practice. Before issuing direction, draft it twice. 1 from urgency. 2 from curiosity. Read aloud which tone expands the room. Choose the one where breath returns after the period. Linguistic integrity. Words as nervous contracts. Power. Without linguistic integrity fractures trust before a single outcome unfolds. Every phrase we utter forms an implicit contract with the body, ours and others. When language outruns breath, the nervous system perceives a lie, even if the mind insists on truth. The physics of congruent speech arises from breath map state. Congruence occurs when semantics, physiology, and intention align. Incongruence triggers micro-dissonance, raised shoulders, darting eyes, and a half-second delay before response. Examples. Everything's under control. Tight exhale equates to covert panic. I need your help. Steady inhalation equates to authentic request. Over time, repeated incongruence calcifies into culture. Departments fluent in spin, leaders trained in vagueness. Mirror linguistic decode excessive modal verbs, should, must expose internalized coercion. Passive constructions, it was decided, remove evasion of agency. Over-positive tone leads to suppression of doubt. Practice. Speak one habitual statement twice. First in your default rhythm, then again while matching sentence length to a single calm breath. Notice which version feels inhabitable. Regulation precedes revelation. Reflection. Where does my speech exceed my breath? Which promises tighten my chest the moment they leave my lips? Hunger and humility. Decoding ambition. Ambition is a sacred flame. Unchecked, it becomes wildfire. Conscious power requires discerning hunger's origin. Is it a reach for expression or a sprint from inadequacy? 2 currents of drive 1. Egoic hunger, dopamine-looped, comparative, future-fixated. Linguistic cues, superlatives, urgency, deficit framing, not enough yet. 2. Soulful hunger, value-anchored, process-honoring, present-aware. Cues, verbs of craft, build, learn, serve, temporal spaciousness. Stoic philosophy names this temperance, Buddhist teaching, right effort. Both point to discipline without deprivation, motion governed by meaning. Ambition audit, mini practice. List 3 goals. For each ask, what pain am I avoiding? Whose gaze defines success? Would I still choose this if unseen? Reflection. What drives my drive? When applause fades, does the task retain tenderness? The Power Integrity Map 2.0, a cartography for ethical influence. Consider axis, guiding question, shadow drift, and regulating gesture. Let's examine each. Axis motives, why, guiding question, what need birth this action? Shadow drift, validation seeking, regulating gesture, name intent aloud. Axis methods, how, guiding question, does process mirror values, shadow drift, expedience, regulating gesture, slow tempo. Asis, mirrors who, guiding question, who reflects consequence, shadow drift, echo chambers, regulating gestures, invite dissent. Axis metrics, what, guiding questions, what is measured? Quantity over quality, regulating gesture, well-being, axis memory, legacy. Guiding question, what endures beyond me? Shadow drift, short-term optics, regulating gestures, document learning application. Select a recent decision, corporate strategy, campaign, or conversation. Trace it across the axes. Where motive and method misalign, integrity leaks energy. Practice, draft a brief power statement. I influence to, by, with feedback from measuring, so that remains. Spoken aloud, this becomes a living vow, heard by the body, a regulating rhythm. Somatic literacy of leadership. The body broadcasts leadership long before language. Somatic literacy, fluency in posture, breath, micro-expression, translates authority into safety. Power posture versus presence posture. Power posture. Elevated chin, rigid spine, forward lean, indicates signals of dominance, invites and provokes defense. Presence posture. Grounded feet, open sternum, soft gaze indicates signals of inclusion. This invites dialogue. Triad practice, ground gaze. Give 1, ground. Feel weight through soles, exhale into contact. 2. Gaze, widen peripheral vision, register context. 3. Give, speak 1 sentence offering clarity, not control. Polyvagal insight, ventral engagement, eye contact. Prosody, co-regulates teams faster than mandates. Reflection. What posture do I assume when challenged? Does my spine seek height or depth? Conscious power in context ethics proves itself in application. Corporate shift from toxic meritocracy, win at all costs, to transparent hierarchy, roles as responsibilities, not ranks. Policy signals, shared profit pools, psychological safety audits, and language training in NSL for managers. Political. Replace adversarial debate with dialogic governance. Speech reform. Slower cadence in parliamentary address. Questions preceding claims. Rhetoric moves from persuasion to participation. Relational. Parents regulating tone before discipline. Partners stating needs without negotiation theatre. Phrase swap. You never listen to swap to. I feel unheard when plans change suddenly. Cultural. Narratives migrate from hero myths to steward stories. Strength measured by scenario. A community organizer convenes circles, not rallies. Agenda. Each voice outlines a local tension, then names one personal resource. Outcome. Distributed authority. Momentum through resonance, not pressure. Conscious power, scaled, becomes cultural coherence. Systems breathing at the pace of trust. Ethical influence and nervous system resonance. Influence begins in physiology before persuasion ever reaches the intellect. A regulated tone signals safety. An unsteady cadence seeds skepticism. To wield power ethically is to become fluent in resonance, the synchrony between one's nervous system and another's capacity to stay open. The neuroscience of influence. Mirror neurons respond not to ideology but to effect. Calm evokes coherence. Agitation multiplies itself. Oxytocin loops reward mutual trust. Cortisol cascades punish chronic vigilance. Dopamine spikes entice but seldom sustain allegiance. Therefore, ethical influence relies on stability over stimulation. The body you bring to a room writes the first line of every conversation. Ethics as alignment. Ethics isn't abstract morality. It's real-time congruence, alignment between intention, action, and impact. Ask before each decision. 1. Intention. What state am I speaking from? 2. Action. Does my tone honor that state? 3. Impact. How does the listener's body respond? The pause, pulse, phrase practice 1. Pause. Inhale once before reply. Locate center of gravity. 2. Pulse. Sense heartbeat, tempo of truth. 3. Phrase. Let language follow regulation, not rush. Try it in a heated dialogue. The fraction of stillness reconfigures the outcome. Reflection. Who becomes calmer when I speak? If agitation spreads, what hidden fear fuels my eloquence? Integration practice suite. A toolkit for weaving awareness into daily influence. Awareness audit. Journal these prompts weekly. Where did I speak faster than I could feel? Which outcome demanded control rather than clarity? When did silence carry more weight than words? Lexical reframing. Identify 3 habitual commands. Rewrite them into collaborative invitations. You need to fix this. Reframes as let's review options together. That's not how we do it. Reframes as show me your reasoning. Tone test aloud. Choose phrasing that lowers shoulders, yours first. Tone tracking. Record a short reflection each evening. Note breath length, pitch shifts, and emotional residue. Over time, graph your regulation signature, the acoustic fingerprint of integrity. Power integrity check-in once a week. Map a decision through the power integrity axes, motives, methods, mirrors, metrics, and memory. Circle any drift. Schedule recalibration, not reprimand. Mirror talk mantra. Stand before a mirror, feet grounded. May my voice be steady, my motive seen, my impact kind. Repeat until exhale lengthens. Integration lives in repetition, not revelation. Reflection and mantra. Pause the intellect, invite embodiment. Inquiry. What does ethical influence feel like in my body? Warmth behind the sternum displays congruence. Constriction in the throat equates to withheld truth. Tingling limbs internalizes adrenaline masking doubt. Let awareness transmute tension into tempo. Truth spoken at natural rhythm self-corrects. Integration spiral. Tension leads to truth, which leads to trust. Trust adjusts tempo, and then vocal motor function transmission. Each cycle trains fascia and phrase alike toward coherence. Closing reflections. Conscious cultures. Leadership ends where culture begins. A single regulated voice can seed systemic resonance. Many can compose civilization. Macro vision. Education teaches emotional syntax alongside literacy. Economics rewards restoration, not depletion. Governance measures well-being, not productivity or velocity. Technology amplifies empathy, not addiction. Reform starts in micro-moments. A manager who pauses, a parent who names fear without fury, a citizen who asks before asserting. Reiteration. Systems mirror selves. Each breath reclaimed from control scripts rewrites collective rhythm. Legacy prompt. What tone will your leadership leave behind? Influence echoes beyond lifespan. Resonance is inheritance. When you next feel the impulse to tighten strings, remember, the stage is gone. There is only presence, pulsing quietly in open hands. Throughout this episode, The Puppet Strings, we have traced the architecture of manipulation, how corporate ladders, political podiums, and social stages reward the clever shadow. We learned that the puppeteer's genius is not evil, but incomplete, strategy without soul, design without dialogue. Integration arrives when awareness steadies ambition, when voice carries voltage yet stays kind. Take with you this embodied reminder. Regulation is the grammar of integrity and transparency. As we step from systems that reward the shadow into the architecture of control itself, our next exploration turns inward again, toward fear's fortress. Episode 8, Boundaries of Fear, Control, Order and the Illusion of Safety, the Anatomy of Anxiety and Rigidity. Here we'll meet three guardians at the gate. The Order Keeper, obsessive traits seeking salvation in structure. The Watcher, vigilance masquerading as vision. The Edge Walker, borderline volatility, fearing abandonment more than chaos. Together we'll examine how anxiety dresses as authority, how rules become rituals of reassurance, and how loosening the grip can reveal, not ruin, our safety. Thank you for walking this corridor of consciousness with me. The Puppet Strings was never about blame. It was an anatomy of design, how systems, like people, can mistake control for competence. If something stirred, a recognition, a release, pause before acting. Feel breath reclaim its full length. Awareness, not urgency, is reform's first tool. Until next time, speak steadily, lead transparently, and let your presence, not performance, move the world. You've been listening to The Shadow Spectrum. I'm James Miller.